Good
Ladies
evening.
and gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone. It is exactly 1 minute to 7, so we are going to get started to the County Sheriff Candidate Forum for today, September 27th. We are not live. It will be replayed, and I am not Bruce, so you hello.
Hi, my name is Bruce Lee Clark, and you are?
Sean Marie Oler.
Great. We want to welcome you here this evening to Bennington tonight, produced by Mike Bethel, for this candidate forum for the candidates for Bennington County Sheriff. We also want to thank the 3 candidates who you will be hearing a great deal from during tonight's forum. And we want to thank also this evening's underwriters, CL White Glass on Gage Street and the Bennington Mill Properties on Benmont Avenue. And we also want to extend thanks to the town of Bennington for the use of the facility, and to GNAT-TV, who are recording this evening's forum. It is live on Facebook, and it will be posted to their YouTube channel.
So you've heard a couple, both Bruce and I go around and talk about the purple or the index cards that are around, but for the audience, we want to get a few preliminaries out of the way, including giving you all a sense of how the evening will proceed. The candidates have drawn numbers to see who will go first. Is this the question order? Mm-hmm. We will be asking questions, the same question of each candidate. We will then open up the floor for your questions, and in order to facilitate that process, we'd like you to write your questions on one of the cards you'll find around the room and pass them up to us. You may include your name if you wish, but you do not have to. We want to address as many issues as time allows as is possible. So,
toward the end, depending upon how the conversation is going, we'll move to final statements, and then we'll go to the order of final statements. That was part of the order that was the drawing. Okay? So, to introduce the candidates, Sean Marie and I will do that. Basically, this is information that the candidates have provided to us, or the way in which they wanted to be introduced. To my immediate right is Chad Schmidt. Mr. Chad Schmidt, who's been a member of the Bennington County Sheriff's Department for 24 years, the last 9 as the county sheriff. In 1997, he graduated from Southern Vermont College with a degree in criminal justice, and in 2016, he graduated from Columbia Southern University with a master's degree in public administration. He's served on many local organizations, including but not limited to the Bennington Rural Fire Department, the local Elks Club, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Sacred Heart School trustees. Mr. Schmidt is married and is a father of 3 children. Next to Chad is Mr. Beau Alexander Sr. Mr. Alexander is running for sheriff as an independent.
and to his right is James Gulley. He is a lifelong resident of Bennington. James is an educator at the Southern Vermont CDC Center. He teaches law enforcement to secondary. He has taught law enforcement to secondary students from 2016 and is currently still there. James is a law enforcement officer for the Manchester Police Department, where his primary focus is narcotic investigation, which he's been at since 2016 through 2018. James was a detective for the Vermont State Police Drug Task Force from 2016 to 2017, and James was a law enforcement officer for the Bennington Police Department from 2003 to 2016. James has a master's degree in public administration from Norwich University, 2016, and James is also a dedicated family man. Thank you again for being here. So we do have quite a few questions. So we're going to start in the reverse order with James. And the first question I'd like to ask is, can you describe what you believe the job of the sheriff is?
Would you like me to stand?
You don't have to stand, no. Just speak loud enough so they can hear you.
Okay. Hello, good evening. So I believe that in order to be qualified to become sheriff and/or what the sheriff must be effective in are 3 categories. The first category is you must be proficient in law enforcement. Now, I'm not talking about in the sense of drafting traffic tickets. I'm talking about in the sense of policy creation. I'm talking about in the sense of establishing an effective strategic plan for our county and for our county's needs. Second, you have to strongly understand business. And in the sense of business, what I mean by that is financial management, business planning, marketing, sales, and estimating. And lastly, you have to be an effective people person. You have to be available. Now, I'm not just talking about during an election time, I'm talking about during your entire tenure. On top of that, you also have to be trusted. So those are the 3 qualities that I believe meet the needs of sheriff. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just reminding the speaker, since there is no PA system set up,
Speak a little louder.
speak a little louder so that everybody speak to the back wall.
Sure.
Beau,
Could you hear James back there? Okay, thank you.
thanks. That's helpful. If you can't ever hear, please say something, wave your hand so that we know. Thanks. Beau.
There's a question, sorry.
The question is, can you describe what you believe the job of the sheriff is?
Job of the sheriff is 2 processes, civil process and prisoner transports. But I also believe it needs to be a community resource. We need to get back to protecting and serving our community and having an open door policy with our department and with the sheriff himself.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chad?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sean Marie and Bruce Lee Clark, for hosting this, moderating this. Mike Bethel, wherever you are, I saw you here earlier. Thank you for putting this on for us, and thank you, all of you, for being here, regardless of who you're supporting in this. I'm appreciative of the attendance and knowing that people really do care about this position. I can tell you firsthand what this position involves. The Vermont statutes and the Vermont Constitution establish a sheriff's department in every county. Sheriff's departments are mandated by law to do 2 essential functions. That's to transport prisoners and to serve civil process. And when I say serve civil process, if you have ever had in fact, as Dick is here tonight, Dick, our process server, I know he's hiding right now. If he ever shows up at your door, it's usually not a good thing, because he's, suing you or serving you papers. Maybe you're being sued or a notice against trespass. So that's one of the essential functions of the department. Prisoner transport is a big thing in Bennington County because our nearest correctional center is in Rutland. It's 54 miles away. So every time a prisoner needs to be brought down, we have to get in our van or cruiser, head to Rutland, and then bring that person to court at given times. In addition to that, corrections isn't always convenient, and they may place someone in Rutland, or females have to go to Chittenden, or people with medical concerns may have to be held in Springfield. And all those people may need to be brought down simultaneously on the same day. So those are the essential functions. So that's all I'm mandated to do. Those are the only things. So imagine for a moment, if you will, what a sheriff's office would look like if the sheriff decided that those were the only 2 functions that they're going to perform, because by law that's all they're obligated to do. You probably wouldn't need 28 cruisers like we have. You wouldn't need 34 deputies. You might have 5 or 6 and maybe a couple of cruisers. So those are the essential functions. Everything else that you see us do in the community is because the sheriff of that county chooses to set forth a strategic plan, if you will, a business model where we are for hire. And to what degree are we for hire? On the tune of 36 to 40,000 man hours per year we perform in this community for maybe contracting with the state for various things. It may be contracting with a private contractor. Any of you have been disgusted with the traffic situation in Bennington and you've seen our blue lights there. That contractor has hired us to be there to perform essential police functions. So everything else that you see a sheriff's department do is because that sheriff decides that that's the business plan, and that's the contracts that we want to try to establish for the community. It could be patrolling for a town that doesn't have their own police department, like Arlington, Pownell, Sunderland, Shaftesbury, all over the county. So anything that we do above and beyond those prisoner transports is because the sheriff has gotten involved, created a business opportunity, and we are essentially operating like a business. So it is important that you have business knowledge and that you are able to perform business functions. It's kind of like, you know, if you want to use the term rent-a-cop, I'm not offended by that because that's really what we do. We are for hire. Everything that we purchase, everything that we do is based on contracts. The state provides us very little in funding to do those essential functions. So I know I'm probably going over in time.
You are, but, so, okay? Okay. So this one will go, just so everybody knows, Beau will answer this question, then Chad, and then James, okay? And this question comes in the context of the statute that was passed by the legislature just this past year.
It's an audience question.
It's from the audience. If I'm holding a purple card, you'll know it's from one of you. If Montpelier sends a direction to confiscate firearms from citizenship of Bennington County, what will you do? And B, what about bump stocks in the nature of firearms? So bump stocks on firearms. Okay, what would you do if Montpelier said that you were to confiscate those? So Beau, it's to you.
Well, if elected sheriff, I will strongly advocate for your Second Amendment right. I'm a gun owner. I've been a gun owner for a very long time, and I don't like the way that things are going with the Second Amendment. We have rights, and the Second Amendment is one of the most infringed rights that we have in the Constitution. Taking orders, if the order came from Montpelier that's what we had to do, then we would have to do that. But prior to that, I will advocate and fight in every way that I can for your Second Amendment right. And as far as bump stocks go, I've never owned one. I've never used one. I really don't see any need for a bump stock.
Thank you.
Me? So the role as a chief law enforcement officer of an organization is to follow the law without prejudice, without bias. We may not like the rules and the laws that we're told to enforce, but the politics can't play a role in that. So when the legislature passes a law and you're essentially ordered to do something, then you follow that order. It's plain and simple.
Thank you. James?
Thank you.
If Montpelier sends police to confiscate firearms, what would you do? That's the first question,
That's
correct?
the first part of it, and then bump stocks.
Okay,
is the
so
addition.
just so that there's a clear understanding here, in order for there to be an order for your firearms to be taken, you have to meet a specific criteria for that firearm to be taken. Like for instance, if you have committed domestic assault and that the state's attorney deems it necessary for that firearm to be taken for the safety of that family, then that firearm will be taken. If you are in any way, form attempting to commit a crime, or if you are unsafe in general, that firearm will be taken. Again, to reinstitute, politics does not play a role in determining what we can and cannot do with Congress or our legislature up in Vermont. You have to follow that request as a law enforcement officer, let alone an executive officer. In regards to the bump stock, I don't see it necessary. Again, I have to concur with Beau on that. I couldn't tell you or identify what a bump stock is. I don't use one, and I'm a hunter. I'm an avid outdoorsman, and I own numerous firearms. But yet I was trained, I was brought up right to respect a firearm. Thank you.
Thank you.
So who does this go to?
This goes to Chad, and then James, and then Beau.
I'm glad you're keeping track.
I am.
Need a slide rule.
This question also comes from the audience, and it's a pretty straightforward question. Should a Vermont sheriff hire deputies from just Vermont?
Should a Vermont sheriff hire deputies solely from Vermont?
Yes.
No, I think especially in our region, any qualified candidate should be given an opportunity. We have several deputies now that are from New York State. We have some that are from Massachusetts, and they have been tremendous assets. And given the lack of really qualified people coming forward to want to apply for a position in law enforcement, geography should not be a restricting factor in that decision. So I absolutely allow anybody from any other state, if they can get here and show up to work on time and they meet all the qualifications, I'll offer them an opportunity. So.
Okay. James.
Well, I am the homegrown kid here. I'm born and raised here. I grew up here. I stayed in Vermont. I was educated in Vermont both in my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree. Now, if I have built a rapport with somebody in town who's local versus somebody who's out, I'm going to look at the local, and here's why. Because the local can identify the pulse of this community. That local has somebody that has roots here. The family is here, as was I. So nothing against the outsourced individual who's looking for the job. And are they both equal? Possibly, yes. However, am I going to look at that hometown? Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Beau?
I feel that hiring should be both locally and outsourced. Outsourced people, not everybody that lives in Bennington County is from Bennington County. So you have a lot of diversity there. And hiring people from outside of Bennington County will help handle that diversity amongst our community. I feel that local people, hired, that's awesome, that's great, but a lot of that creates a good old boy network that I'm not a big fan of. And I think that we need more people from more areas because Bennington County is people from all over New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and I think that would be great.
Thank you. One of our questions, we haven't gone there yet. So this will be, the order will be James, Beau, and Chad. Vermont has a fair and impartial policing statute updated during the most recent legislative session. What steps are you take or will you take to comply with that law, and what efforts will you make to address the issues surrounding implicit bias among the officers that you employ? Do you believe personally that there are issues of racial bias in Vermont or specifically Bennington County? Okay? Let me know if that's too long.
I'll try my best.
Whatever. Sure. I knew you would.
In regards to the policy regarding fair and impartial policing, I back the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council and whatever requirements the executive director from the Vermont Police Academy has installed. That would be Director Richard Gauthier. In regards to implicit bias, we all have subconscious associations between groups, traits, people, roles. The problem that we face is that how do we, as law enforcement officers, stay aware of that subconscious awareness? And what I mean by that is that training can be used to educate, because educate is where you improve. Now, the key point here is that if you are offered a training for, whether it be 8 hours, because this is mandatory training, okay? Mandatory training is something that's required by the state. So let's just say you're given 8 hours worth of training. Let's go as far as 40 hours worth of training. Now the question that comes to mind is, as somebody who with an administrative mind, is how are we measuring whether our deputies, in this case, are actually acting as they've been trained? What's the measurement to say that, okay, my deputies have sat through 8, 24, 40 hours worth of implicit bias training, which is fantastic, but are they applying it to the road? Now the question is, how are we going to measure that? And how we can measure that is through advisory boards that they do not exist. And I would like to implement a Sheriff's Department Advisory Board. Another way would be to open up feedback through a community scorecard, if you will, which I learned in my master's program. A lot of your police departments or sheriff's departments will mail out twice a year questions, and they wish to get your feedback. And boy, wouldn't we want to know, if I would love to know, if my agency the deputies are acting correctly, or are they showing that implicit bias? May I get the last? Is that it, or is there another question?
No, I think, do you personally believe that there are issues of racial bias? I think you answered that, actually.
To answer that, I would say that, okay, I believe I answered everything, thank you.
Yeah, I think you did. Beau. Yes, Beau.
So, drugs and bias, racial bias, gender bias is a huge problem in our country right now. It's all over the news. As sheriff, you know, you can, if elected sheriff, I'll provide the best and up-to-date training for deputies. There will be transparency through our department, through deputies, education passed along to our community members by deputies, by the sheriff, an open door policy with the sheriff's department, which we do not have right now. You know, through that, it will rebuild the rapport and trust between our community members and law enforcement, getting back that community vibe, and again, back to protecting and serving, not just every interaction with a law enforcement officer as a negative experience, getting officers back in the community. And yeah, so racial bias, gender bias, and you know, drug and addiction bias are a huge problem in our country.
So biases are evident and clear in our community, in every community in the United States, and probably even in other countries, more specifically. The difference between explicit and implicit biases are huge. We can all identify explicit biases based on people's actions, their words, what they're saying, how they treat other people. Implicit biases are a little different. We all possess them. They're stereotypes. They're things in our minds that affect our understanding of other cultures, of other, you know, race, religion, sex. And the hard part becomes is how do we identify those? And people that don't have explicit biases sometimes have a lot of difficulty understanding that they have implicit bias, because they think it means that they're like some evil person that, you know, that possesses this bad quality. It's not a bad quality. It's typically based on all of the experiences that we've had in our life. When it becomes bad is if you don't recognize it and you let it affect your decisions and in this case, your law enforcement actions. So some of the things that I did as a leader, I partnered with Curtis Reed, who runs the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity here in Vermont. We put on a two-evening training. It was about 8 hours. And we talked about all those uncomfortable issues. And the department was mandated to go through all that. On a continuing nature, we have online trainings that I partnered with through Police One. It's an online training scenario. They have a couple of courses on cultural diversity, and they also have one on implicit bias. So we're always expanding that opportunity to learn about biases, and some of the ways that we try to detect if the deputies are performing or you know, in a way where the implicit bias is exposed is by reviewing some of their videotapes with the cruisers. And I got to tell you that if somebody feels that one of my deputies is doing something wrong, the phone rings. I mean, I know not everybody will call and report, but more times than not, we've given them enough opportunities, whether it's anonymously through our tip 411 or our website, or picking up the phone and calling us. People are not afraid to complain, not like they used to. But the other issue is the culture within the agency. It's extremely important. If as a leader you may not openly say that this behavior is okay, but if you don't do anything about it, then it's pretty much expressed that it is okay. And so it's very important that you have a handle on the culture within your agency. And we are very good at doing that. We have diversity in our agency. We have people who are lesbian. We have people who are gay. We have a black officer. You've probably seen him dancing in the traffic. We have a Hispanic officer. So we have women. We've tried very hard to diversify, and I got to tell you, that's hard sometimes in Vermont, but I think we've done a really good job at making sure that other cultures are represented in our agency. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask, it's my turn, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question that we had written, and then I'm going to follow it up with an audience question. So the first question is around the organizational structure and financing in the Sheriff Department. It may not be clear to all how the Sheriff Department works, although Chad did a little explaining. So how do you see the role of the county sheriff in making its organizational structure, as well as its financing, transparent to the taxpayers of Bennington County?
So that would be Beau, then Chad, then James.
And so will the second question?
Yes, it ties in.
Okay.
So I'm first.
Yep.
So, to keep it pretty simple for you, I'm a simple man, I don't want to bore you with a bunch of words. Taxpayer saving options, we can do that. We can get grants through negotiated contracts, the 5% that the sheriff is entitled to in his salary. That, for me, if elected by the sheriff, will go back to the community equally between the community and the sheriff's department. On top of that, I personally, 25% of my salary, the $82,000 that's paid by the state, 25% of that is going back to the sheriff's department and to the community. Every year that I am sheriff of Bennington County.
Thank you.
Then Chad.
So the organizational structure is not unlike other agencies as far as the paramilitaristic structure. We have a captain, a lieutenants, sergeants, and so on. So the rank and file is very similar to what you would see in any other organization. The difference comes in the funding sources. So county government in Vermont is very weak. There's us, there's a probate judge, and then there's the assistant judges. The assistant judges set the budget for the county. Half of that budget goes to my organization to pay for all the things that Title 24, Section 78, I believe, support of the Sheriff's Department requires them to do. Things like pay for my building, pay a couple of bookkeepers, they pay for my annual audits, they pay the power bill, they pay the heat bill, the phone bill. So everything that I need to sort of exist is just a place to go and have an office that the county supports. They support that to the tune of about $240,000 a year. Last year we did about 1.5 million in revenue, and about 1.4 million went out in expenses. And that's everything from purchasing cruisers to fuel, uniforms, payroll expenses, what have you. Anything that you would need to pay out comes through those types of contracts. We do have grants through Governor's Highway Safety. We are provided a couple of deputies from the state as far as their benefits are paid through the state to transport prisoners. So it's a mix on how we do things. We are transparent in our finances in the sense that every other year we're required to have an audit. I choose to have an audit every year, and that audit is on the state auditor's website, and you can access it and you can see very clearly how much money we make and how much goes out, what our expenses are, what our depreciation is. So it's very transparent.
Thank you.
James.
So I would say the key term here is transparency. I'm not going to get into the mud of the agency because we just heard that. What I'm going to discuss is the transparency of the agency, and what transparency means is to be able to look into or to see. Now, I have taken some significant time and I've reviewed finances of the Sheriff's Department. I've looked at all audits, and the audits are every 2 years, not every one. Now, there are significant, there are significant deficiencies that need to be addressed within the Sheriff's Department. The first is that when you are an executive officer, you are a sheriff of the agency, you should not have write access into your Quickbooks, to your Quickbooks. You should not have that. You should not be able to go in and to adjust financially monies as the sheriff. That's where the CPA or the bookkeeper comes involved. That was one of the internal deficiencies that was noted numerously. Additionally, People in our county want to know what's going on within the agency. So why are we not being proactive in that sense and getting out into the community? What I mean by that is that why are we waiting for our door to be open to have them come in? Why don't we go out to them? And in the sense of, why aren't we having an advisory board? A Sheriff's Department advisory board. Now, on that advisory board would be a panel of 7. Of course, it's an informal organization. What it does is then you would have people on your advisory board, not all your friends. You would want your critics there as well. Now, you would get a very good, strong feedback coming back about the pulse or the knowledge base within your community. So let's just say there were implicit biases, there would be feedback. If there were concerns, there would be feedback. And you would also work diligently through educating your advisory board, who would then in turn go back and amplify that back into the community. Now, in order to correct the deficiencies within the agency, to get back to the financial aspect of it, that's going to take time. But yet, we have to recall that profitable, sustainable growth requires accurate financial information. And I will, on day one, sit down with my CPA, who I have picked out, and we will go over systems, controls, and procedures within the agency to fix, maybe find more and repair those, so I can continue to develop the agency to where it should be. Thank you.
So there were actually a couple questions from different people that sort of follow up on this, and one is actually a pretty simple one that Beau and Chad can answer, but you'll have to tell me the direction.
That's actually Beau, and then Chad is next.
So
So we're
it's-
going to keep the same order for this because they're all sort of clustered around together.
So do you believe the sheriff should have read and write access to QuickBooks?
Absolutely not.
Okay?
Yes, I do, and I believe I should, and I actually do. The reason is, it's a small office. There's 3 people that perform accounting functions within my office. So when the auditor came back with that, there's a managerial response, which wasn't read, but part of that response was that I still have read and write access. So if I need to write a check because someone is out that day, if I need to enter a transaction, I'm able to do that. But what I have to do then is log what I've done in QuickBooks. And I have an outside accountant, she's a CPA, she comes in and she reconciles the books, and she makes sure that everything that I did is above board. When you have a small operation, it's very hard to separate and delegate duties, and it's essential that, the buck stops with me. If one of my employees screws up, it's still going to come back on me. I'm not going to not have access to any system within my agency. If I didn't have access, one of my employees, if they were disgruntled, could lock me out of the system, which would create a nightmare. So as long as I'm sheriff, I will still have that access, but I have taken steps in order to make sure that transparency is taken into consideration, and someone from the outside is looking at everything that I do. So there's no secrets, nobody's stealing any money. I've often said that, if I were to take money from that agency, it'd be like stealing from myself. It's when you spend 24 years within an agency, you built it from the ground up. You've had your vision for the department, and you've also made that vision come true. You don't then do things against yourself, like taking money or doing anything nefarious with the accounting system.
So James, you kind of answered that in a previous question. Did we?
Do you want it?
Oh, sure, I'm going to continue off that,
Yep.
if I could.
Yes.
So, for the mandated state audit reports that are submitted, their most recent is 2017. The state required that a CPA review documents, which is not taking place. Additionally, internal deficiencies in regards to a government-run law enforcement agency. Okay? You have to trust the people that work for you. You have to treat people with respect. On top of that, I have never worked for a law enforcement agency, whether it be Bennington Police Department, whether it be Manchester Police Department, or the Vermont State Police Drug Task Force, where the head boss is running the finances. I've never seen that. And I would consider that unethical. So in my sense of the word, this is not a private family business. It would be different if it was. This is not. This is your money. And it would be almost, and I'm not making any accusation here, but almost be like letting the fox in the hen house. No. That will not happen under my control. It will not happen under my leadership, and that is a significant lack of leadership. Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
You'll have a chance later. Okay, I'm going to ask you.
It's your turn.
Yep, it is my turn. You would have to be, you would have to be, well, I think all of you know, all of us know that there is an increasing, or at least there is a considerable opiate issue in Bennington County, in Vermont, in the United States. There is a changing culture regarding drug use with the change that the legislature has made with regard to the availability of marijuana. And lots of other things in between. What concrete steps do you plan on taking, or have you begun to take, depending on who you are, that will begin to help the community address all of these issues from the perspective of the Sheriff's Department? And we'll begin with Chad, move on to James, and then to Beau.
So this has been a hot topic throughout the nation. It's a nationwide epidemic. 21 to 29% of patients that are prescribed opiates for chronic pain misuse them. 8 to 12% develop an addiction. 4 to 6 of those transition to heroin. And one of the most significant statistics that I'm going to share with you that you may or may not know, 80% of heroin users abused prescription opioids first. 80%. So we have a prescribing problem, number one. So let's talk first about what we've done. And I don't mean we just as the Sheriff's Department, I mean we collectively in law enforcement in conjunction with other coalitions and even physicians. So back in around 2010, we had the first prescription drug take-back that was sponsored by the DEA. The Sheriff's Department was the first one in the county to have a take-back event. We had it at our old office on Lincoln Street, where people were given an opportunity to bring back unused and unwanted prescription drugs. It was extremely successful. We got on the bandwagon and decided how can we make this program happen more often, not every just 6 months. So with other coalitions, we stepped up, and we have drop box locations now at almost every law enforcement agency in the county, including my office. We have one up at the hospital, and we're continuing to try to partner with pharmacies to take back more. We also developed the mail-back program, and actually I went and testified before the legislature about our program, and that model in Bennington County is now used statewide. If you've seen any of the mail-back envelopes, that started here in Bennington County. I also agreed to send a deputy to everybody's home if you have shut-ins or people that can't get out. You call us up, send a deputy to the house, and we'll pick up your unused or unwanted prescription drugs. You don't have to mail them, and you don't have to come to our office. That's how dedicated we were to getting rid of these unused drugs. The Shire's Prescription Coalition, in conjunction with local law enforcement, worked to educate prescribers about the overprescription of opioids and try to look at other ways to manage chronic pain. The state has since passed a law in limiting, you can no longer get 30 opioid pills. Now I think it's down to 7 days worth instead of 30 days worth, or even 90 in some cases. And they advocated for that change in the law. Since 2012, we've had a deputy in the drug task force under my watch. Prior Sheriff Gary Forrest also had a couple of deputies that were in that task force. So we've supported that model. And if you've seen in the paper recently, the drug bust that happened in Bennington a week and a half ago or so, that was work of the Southern Vermont Drug Task Force. So they're in our community and they're assisting that effort. You might have remembered Operation County Strike. It happened probably 4 years ago now, 5 years ago, where we had 47 drug dealers arrested in the largest sweep in Vermont history. The Sheriff's Office supplied 13 deputies. Those are non-billable hours, by the way. So that's us donating our time and giving back to assist in that. I reinstituted the K-9 program. Now the K-9 isn't just about drugs. It can do tracking and other things. We do K-9 demonstrations. It's a great way to get into the schools and build a rapport with the young students. But it also does help with the drug problem. I've supplied Narcan to all the deputies. They've been educated on how to use it to bring people back from overdoses. We also began the TIP 411 program, where people can get on their cell phone, they can use our app, and they can start giving us anonymous tips on drug locations or basically anything that they want to give us. We then forward those to the drug task force or the agency that might be able to handle it if it's not a drug situation. So what are some of the next steps? Bennington County had the largest DARE program in the state under Gary Forrest. I was a DARE officer for about 5.5, 6 years. Went into schools. We had a great drug education program. We don't have that anymore. The reason we don't have it anymore is because the schools took the funding away. They really didn't see the curriculum kind of got stale. There wasn't a lot of updates from DARE America. But I'd like to get back into the schools with a drug education program. There's a new program out called LEAD, which is a drug prevention program with a K-12 curriculum that's delivered by a law enforcement officer. I'd like to see a police officer in every elementary school delivering this curriculum. It doesn't have to be the sheriff's department, it could be any police department. They talk about goal setting, decision making, prescription and over-the-counter drug use, stimulants, narcotics, opioids, depressants, anger management skills, underage drinking, conflict resolution, and also tobacco. We're also going to continue to support the task force and advocate for as much presence in Bennington County as we can. I'm not a fan of creating another task force. We already have that model. I'm here to support them in that endeavor. We provide officers with continued drug interdiction training, ways to observe and detect interdiction, drug trafficking in our area. That training needs to be ongoing. And I'd like to also add another K-9 and a handler to go along with our current handler. I think adding another one would allow us to do different times, different shifts, and I think it's important, and we can fund that. Some of our barriers to that success, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Department of Justice under the Trump administration is withholding $1.8 million from the JAG grant and the burn funds for drug interdiction work. That money, a lot of that goes into the task force. So that's something that we need to work with our federal partners, our legislative partners there, and try to get that funding back here. Local funds are limited. Municipal agencies need select boards to allocate funds to these types of situations. And that's, the drug problem isn't the only function that a police department or a sheriff's department needs to handle. They have other priorities. When people call 911, you still need to respond. You can't just focus solely on one problem. Another issue is going to be personnel. There's going to be over 100 state troopers retiring next year. Think about that for a minute. 100 state troopers are eligible to retire. So our problems are going to get worse before they get better, but I think I've outlined and responded well to the situation.
Thank you. And everybody else will have extended time on that one. James, you're up.
So the opiate crisis in the state of Vermont is horrific. A lot of good people have died. So what I want to talk about is the elephant in the room. I'm not here to discourage the drug take-back program. It's an effective program. Let's talk about fentanyl. We've had numerous overdoses in southern Vermont within the last month. Good people have passed. And I myself have worked in the drug task force. I have been tasked with working with federal agents, ATF, FBI, DEA. I have purchased firearms with the help of confidential informants. as well as purchase sleeves. Now, just so that if I use terminology, I apologize, but just so that we're clear, I have a very clear understanding of what this is. Bundle is 10 bags of heroin. A brick is considered 50. And a sleeve, that's considered 100 bags of heroin. Now, when I get involved as a narcotic investigator, I purchase sleeves of heroin right outside these walls with firearms. Not only in Bennington, not only in Manchester, but that ranged from the Pownell line all the way up to Middlebury College, because I covered 3 counties as a drug task force investigator. Just so that we're clear, 80% of the calls that the drug task force handle are outside of Bennington County. Now, that's not to fault the drug task force, because I highly respect the unit and they're the best in the state. And my Bennington bosses know this, because I had to report to them as I was en route to Rutland. Because Rutland, people, is ground zero. And that's where the heroin initiative grant is going towards, the millions of dollars that have been dispensed by Senator Patrick Leahy. Now, additionally, the drug task force, think about the tip of a spear. They handle the worst of the worst, that tip. So, for instance, if you have an organization, an organized crime organization that is distributing approximately 10,000 bags of heroin every 3 days, they're going to handle that, which as the one recently in Bennington, where I was also involved in that by well over a year ago. And that's a federal case. It takes time and a strong strategic plan to attack these people that are spreading poison and death in our communities. Every day for, I'm going to say, since 2010, since I've been diligently involved, I have handled phone calls. I've talked to loved ones. People have called me asking for help. Just today, I was with the Bennington County Addiction Coalition, Manchester Fed Up, One Heartbeat, trying to propose and to deliver software for those that they can immediately, in real life moment, touch that app and get delivered what's available for beds, treatment, and for help. Now, when I am elected sheriff, I will institute the County Sheriff Investigation Unit. And the reason for that is because I'm not going to compete against the State Police Drug Task Force. I'm going to work with them. This has been in the making in my head and in conversation with them for well over a year. Because I sat in at my desk, whether it be behind a wheel or behind a computer, and I said, what can I do better? What can be done best for the people of Bennington County? Sometimes coming down, doing a buy, sometimes going outside of Rutland County, and then in Bennington. That's not reasonable. It's not effective, because we're working in silos, everyone. So I want to, as sheriff, bring forth that collaboration. Everybody comes under one roof so that Bennington isn't tasked with solving this crime. Because I can assure you that people that are coming into Bennington and Manchester and Pownell and Peru are coming up from Mass and down from Rutland and other outsourced areas. In regards to the 411, 411 is a system that is created. Information does go through 411, which is run by the Sheriff's Department currently, but right now it comes through as anonymous information. And that information gets outsourced to other law enforcement agencies. It's not investigated through the Sheriff's Department. I would like there to be a section on that 411 where you will not remain anonymous. If you choose to give your name, because people will, we can use that information and build an effective case and or document the intelligence. Regards to the county strike, some time ago, that was an effective drug task force, Bennington County Drug Task Force case that was implemented and funded by Senator Dick Sears, whereas numerous people of those who have been arrested since then have passed away because of drug overdoses. It's not only about the arrest and the effectiveness, you have to render people help. And I want to collaborate as the County Sheriff Investigation Unit with people like Fed Up Vermont and other organizations such as recovery, treatment, mental health, and homeless organizations to get them that immediate help that they need. Because once we make that arrest, they're at their most vulnerable. And they look you in the eye and they'll tell you, I just want to die. And I'm not going to go to bed anymore and sleep on my pillow and worry that blood could, and this may sound horrific, but blood could be on my hands. It's my job as a law enforcement officer to render these people help. And I have the possibility to do more as Sheriff of Bennington County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Beau?
So, if elected sheriff, there needs to be a collaborative effort with all entities and agencies within the county of Bennington. I want to work harder and tougher with the state's attorney's office to enforce strict, hard punishment for anyone coming outside of our community bringing drugs inside. Currently now I'm a federal contractor. I work all over the state of Vermont. St. Johnsbury, there was a federal bust that yielded $95,000 worth of heroin and fentanyl. What is here that hasn't been found yet? With everybody that's dying, I've lost 5 people that I know within the last month. 5 people I supervised when I worked for probation and parole. We need to work with DLC, better accountability and supervision. Not that they're doing a bad job, but better accountability and supervision with the offenders that are in our community. Expand the GPS and electronic monitoring system that the Sheriff's Department does now. Supervised by deputies, not just by the DLC. Area treatment facilities and treatment leaders in our counties, Turning Point, Fed Up. We all need to work together as a team because at the end of the day, it's affecting all of us. It's not knocking down our front door. It's not knocking down my front door, but it eventually will. With medical professionals getting training out there, working on the same page so we can fight this all together. Educators in our schools, passing the education along to them so that way it can be passed along to our children and our grandchildren coming up. And like I said, with all local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, and most importantly, you guys, the community members, with that open door policy, like I said, that we don't have now, with open transparency with the department, you can come, you can get the knowledge you need, and training our deputies and them passing along that training and education that they received to you will help you better identify what's going on in the community. Because there's a lot. I worked for probation and parole in Bennington for about 5 years. There's a lot of stuff that happens here that if you guys knew about, you guys would be kicking down the doors in Montpelier. And that's my vision if elected as sheriff.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we had a question come up, and it is actually, I could just direct this to Chad, but another question that came up prior to that had to do with the Office of the Vermont State Auditor. And the previous card that came up actually cited where you can find those audits. But the question that came up, and I'm going to ask Chad, is who is the Sheriff Department's CPA, and where can the audits and information on the books that are referenced and balances be obtained?
The state auditor's website, I don't have that website, but if you just Google the Vermont State Auditor, they're in there. Our current CPA is Laura Nesbitt. She freelances and does stuff on the side. She works for Mac Molding up in Arlington as a CPA.
Okay.
And this previous card referenced that the reports for the auditors are required every 2 years. And it's according to, I'm not sure which title, but it's section 290E. So that was part of a question that was kind of answered in some of the other
Right, and it is only required every 2 years, but I get one every year by my choice.
Right. And who does that?
The same company that the state contracts with to do the biennial ones.
That's helpful. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Different question. There have been recent articles that have raised questions with regards to the accountability and autonomous nature of Vermont Sheriff's Departments And that's obviously beyond the purview of these three gentlemen because that's set up by statute, as you know. But they highlight the susceptibility for unethical business practices and possible corruption. Those articles are from 7 days, and I heard of one on VPR, Vermont Public Radio. So the question from the audience is, what have you done or what will you do to ensure that the Sheriff's Department will not succumb to such exploitation as described in those articles, and really due to the autonomous nature of the of Sheriff's Departments in Vermont? And according to my records, it'll be James, then Beau, and then Chad.
So that was a wonderful article, very informative. In regards to making sure that there is openness, again, we're going to fall back to the term transparency. You want to make sure that you are open and you are available, and so aren't your documents. What I mean by that is that when I'm elected sheriff, I have already spoken with Bill Deveneaux. And Bill is a CPA finance attorney. And Bill and I sat down and we went over the finances within the financial disclosures, the 2017 financial disclosures. And as well as other people. And what I will do is I will bring forth a monthly financial disclosure, which does not happen as far as I know. I have not seen it. I have searched for it. I have not been given it. And I have looked for it. I cannot find it. What I was informed also by my person who reviewed is that what it appears is that fall finances are computed annually, once a year. So allows, how do you keep your agency from taking that hard turn where there could be confusion, there could be accusations, I don't know. However, the one area that I would focus on, probably that would quickly answer this question because I'm beginning to mumble, would be transparency. Opening up to the public, letting the public see, identifying with the public, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh,
We're going to kill you with this word, transparency. All right?
it's okay. It's a good word.
Open doors, open policies. A lot of people during my time knocking door to door, they had a question. They asked me about the 5% negotiated contract that goes into the sheriff's salary. My biggest thing is that 5% is going to go back to the community, equally with the sheriff's department. It's that, for me, that level, being able to go out and negotiate a contract, getting a 5% does open the door for corruption. If the select board in Stanford says we want deputies from Friday to Saturday, it's a negotiated contract, the sheriff gets 5% of that, well, that deputy's out writing tickets and making and generating the funds that's paid to the sheriff's department for the contract that he is. If he's not making that money, it opens up the door for corruption. And it's just transparency, just you guys having an open door so that way you guys can see everything that's going on within the department.
Thank you.
So first of all, the Sheriff's Department receives no revenue from tickets. That doesn't happen. The towns that we write the tickets for receive that money. They reallocate it how they see fit. The state gets a portion. The Victims Assistance Fund gets a portion. As far as the 5%, I want you to think about back to my opening statements where we talked about a sheriff's department that had 4 or 5 cruisers and did prisoner transports and served civil process. Okay, that's all I'm mandated to do. By engaging in contracts, I go from having 5 or 6 people to manage to 34. I have 12, 13 people that are full-time that have health insurance, dental insurance, retirement, you name it. That's a lot of extra work. So that 5% isn't really 5% because I only take around 2%, to the tune of about $25,000 to maybe $28,000 a year on average. That's about 60 cents off of every billable hour goes to pay an additional salary to me because I choose to expand and do all that extra work. As far as what have I done or what will I do, again, having the audits every year. I didn't want to wait every 2 years. 2 years is too long for an audit. If there's employees stealing or if I'm doing something nefarious, it can be caught within a year. So this transparency, again, the Sheriff's Department operates like a business. Those aren't tax dollars that come to me. It's a private business. We are as transparent as we're required to be, and if somebody puts in a Freedom of Information Act request, we have to respond to it. So everything is right there on the website. People are free to ask questions. As far as a monthly report, I'm not sure what that is or what he would be looking for. I'd be more than happy to provide a profit and loss statement. It operates like a business, but remember, those aren't tax dollars. Those are department dollars. They're funds through contract, whether it's a private entity, a town, or even the state of Vermont. But those are not tax dollars when they get into my business. So.
Did we get everybody?
Yep.
So this question comes from the audience, and we also have a similar one. And since the work and the financing of the department is perhaps not part of the public knowledge, how would the voting public be able to assess the relative success of the department in meeting its requirements and goals?
And that would be Beau, then Chad, and then James.
So it would be through documentation. Again, I keep repeating myself. Open doors, transparency. Getting the information out to you guys, as James said earlier, not waiting for someone to come and ask for it, but to put it out there. So that way everybody has access to that on the internet. It could be posted into the Sheriff's Department. It could be generated as a email that goes out automatically, posted in the newspaper, on the Sheriff's website, on the Sheriff's Facebook page. Getting the information out there so that way all the taxpayers know where their money's going. If the select board in any town pays the Sheriff's Department money for a contract, those are taxpayer dollars, period. Money that goes into the Sheriff's Department are taxpayers' dollars. That 5%, however much goes into the current sheriff's pocket, are taxpayers' dollars. And that should not happen. The Sheriff's Department should not be a money-making opportunity for the sheriff.
Thank you.
Can you just repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure.
Did I ask it?
Yeah.
Since the work and financing of the department is perhaps not of public knowledge, how should the voting public know about, well, how should the voting public be able to know about the relative, how did you answer that, Beau?
Yeah.
How should the voting public be able to assess the relative success of the department in meeting the requirements and goals?
Okay. So I think the best way to answer that question is to just simply look around. Look at the equipment that we have, the cruisers that we have, the new building that I purchased and put us into and moved our headquarters. Just simply look around, the uniforms that we wear, the new guns that we purchased, the body armor that we purchased. Those are all done through contracted funds. So you have to be fiscally responsible in order to manage those funds. A sheriff's department could go bankrupt. There's nobody there to bail you out. It's not like when Chief Doucette needs a new cruiser, he goes to the select board and say, hey, I know I wanted this to last 4 years, but it only lasted 3. So you got to pony up some money because we're down a cruiser. I have nobody to go and ask. I can go to the Bank of Bennington and hope that they'll say yes for a loan. So just look around at how it operates, how it's managed. Look at the amount of people that we have working. The 28 plus cruisers that we have, the building, the automotive lift to do our own repairs, the tire changing and balancer so that we can do our own maintenance. Everything we do is to be self-sustaining. It's a business. It's run like a business. And our finances are transparent. It's on the auditor's website. People are free to inquire with a Freedom of Information Act request. But you know, Sheriff's Department isn't usually a topic of conversation except on an election year. People don't care until it's an election year. I've been there 9 years. I've never had a Freedom of Information request until this year. So we are run efficiently. We're transparent. It's run like a business, and under my supervision, it's been exceptionally financially stable. So.
Thank you. James.
So, the mantra that I learned while attending Norwich for my master's degree was, if it gets measured, it gets managed. I have yet to see any measurements. What's the goal of the Sheriff Department? Anybody know? Listen, let's not get tied into the fact that effectiveness is based upon the goods or the equipment you have or the location and where your sheriff is, the building. Don't get distracted by that. Now, as a leader and as an administrative mind, you have to set forth your strategic plan. What are you going to do in your 1-year goal, your 5-year goal? Where do you want to be for you, the citizen, not for the bank? Now, just so that we're all clear here, Sir Robert Peel is the great, we look at him as being the grandfather of modern law enforcement. And the number one rule, he has 9 principles, and the number one principle that Sir Robert Peel lived by is the number one reason for law enforcement is to prevent crime and disorder. Not about equipment or buildings. So what I will do is I will implement, whenever you walk in, for instance, you walk into the Vermont State Police and you look on their wall, you see an 8x11 frame of their strategic plan, what they will be doing, so that it tells all troopers when they turn out on the road, when you go out there, this is what I want you to do, okay? I will do that in the Sheriff's Department, because right now that does not exist. Secondly, how do I know that I am working on something that is indeed effective? How do you know if something is working unless it's measured? We have measurements in our car. We look at our gas tank. We drive down the road. Once it gets close to E, you have to find a Cumberland Farms or something thereof and fill up your car. But yet in the Sheriff's Department, that doesn't exist. So what I will be doing is I will be implementing measurements that will be then re-in-turn divulged back to you, the taxpayer, the member of the county. Now I will be using methods such as qualitative and quantitative data, empirical statistics, plus I will be asking for your feedback. Now qualitative data is something that is derived through a narrative base, something that comes from a conversation. So if you're telling me that something is really functioning well, I go back and I document that, just like I would do as a narcotic investigator in crime intel, into our database, whether who's dealing what, so we can go back and check that and see how many entries they have. I would do the same thing. Ford does it at their garage. How many times my Explorer's been in the shop? What have been the diagnoses? Has it been fixed? And the years that it's been there, so that when I sell it back, it'll go back in a higher fashion. They know what's there. So again, I'm going to revert back to the mantra, what gets measured gets managed. And the same goes for any and all issues in our community. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you. So it's 8, almost 10 after. We have a couple more questions, and we would like to leave some time, whatever's left we'll divide by 3 for closing statements. This question comes from an audience member, and it also was one of our questions surrounding collaboration. So moving forward, what do you believe what role do you want the Sheriff's Department to play in the community?
And that would be, I think, if I'm right, and if I'm not right, you'll correct me, right? I think that's James, or Chad, then James, then Beau. I believe that's correct. Am I wrong?
I believe you're correct.
I think that's right. Because we just ended with that.
So collaboration is extremely important. One of the barriers to the success of the Sheriff's Department is funding. All money to purchase anything is through contracts. So if you don't have a funding source, it's difficult to allocate money to different things. So not operating in silos and collaborating with other organizations is a great way to achieve overarching and common goals. We have always partnered with anyone who wants to partner with us. Other law enforcement agencies, CRJ, UCS, Turning Point, even the legislature, we collaborate with them when we think we need some legislative changes. Alliance for Community Transformation, the Shire's Prescription Drug Coalition, DCF, even as silly as it may sound, the Chamber of Commerce. They have a big economic impact in our community, and obviously the Sheriff's Department is run like a business. So we help and collaborate with them. State's Attorney's Office. We supply an investigator with the State's Attorney's Office. In fact, we subsidize it. The grant doesn't pay for everything that we provide. They don't pay for the cruiser, they don't pay for his cell phone, they don't pay for the uniforms or the cleaning, and they actually don't even cover all of his salary. But we do it because it's a great effort and collaboration, and that helps investigate crimes within the State's Attorney's Office. So I think another important part is the community outreach. Remember in 2009, I started the New Year's Eve Safe Ride program. That's a great way to give back to the community and to collaborate. We've brought over 2,000 people home safely since that plan, and we actually this last year expanded it to Super Bowl Sunday. And we're also thinking right around Thanksgiving time, since that seems to be a pretty popular time to go out, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and even the Friday after. So we're going to work on that. The Santa's Helpers program, where businesses donated funds to buy gifts for needy children in our community, and we hit almost every school in the county. And we gave out thousands of dollars worth of gifts, and the deputies actually contributed their own money to that. Doing K-9 demos in schools, just getting our name out there, being a resource, being approachable. Those are all good ways that we're able to collaborate. Recently, we also assisted with the school bus training with the SVSU. So we're out there, we're collaborating, and we're always looking to expand those relationships and build upon them.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Chad. James.
I got to admit that Safe Ride program is very nice. I've benefited from it once. Thank you. Transparency. However, the role of the Sheriff's Department in the community that I want to see is to be, of course, approachable, friendly, because that's very tough in today's standards. We all have watched the news. However, what I want my deputies to be is to be proactive in the sense of preventative measures. Our goal in law enforcement is to not only respond, because we see a lot of that. Call comes in, incident is punched, you respond. And then you respond again, and then you respond again, and then you respond again. My goal is to allow my deputies to think outside the box. Think of a way to get to the root of that problem and solve that problem. Get to that problem before it becomes a significant problem. So if you hear the term proactiveness, the term proactiveness is not in the term of aggressive law enforcement, because remember, the number one goal for a law enforcement agency, because yes, the Sheriff's Department is a law enforcement agency, is to prevent crime and disorder before it happens. So if you see a ton of blue lights driving around, I tell my students, that's not a form of effectiveness. Not seeing the blue lights is a form of effectiveness. Also, I would like to institute what is identified as Project Lifesaver. Now, my Uncle Jeff, who's passed, had Down syndrome. And my Uncle Jeff, at times when he was a child, was prone to wandering. Now, I know that a canine can be used to track a scent. However, if that scent is not there, what then? Now, my Uncle Jeff had horrible knees. He had fallen a lot, and that would have been a disastrous circumstance for my family. And the same goes for those who have children in their family with autism and or any cognitive disorder. I have already spoken to some fraternal orders who will be willing to purchase this or render significant funds to get this program up in our community. Is $4,000. And what it is it's radio software system. Puts out radio waves. So as the person was to get lost, they would have a tracker, whether it be on their neck or on their wrist. And we would be trained through Project Lifesaver, and if we were getting close, the beeps, of course, would sound closer together. This recently happened over in Washington County, where an elderly male with dementia was lost. He was found miles away from his home, and without that software, I would call it equipment, it would have been very bad. The majority of the sheriff's departments over in New York have this software and render this to their county. I think that is a very effective means to give back.
Can you, is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Beau?
So I had mentioned earlier collaborative efforts with the state's attorney's office, Department of Corrections, medical staff, educators, all law enforcement agencies in the community. As sheriff, some of my short-term goals, I want to revamp on day one, revamp the sheriff's department. I want to educate deputies, educate the community members. Take active measures to protect our schools and our children and grandchildren. Community policing, I want to get that back. I want officers on the beat walking the streets, meeting and greeting, Applegate, Willowbrook, Pleasant Street, Main Street, not just negative confrontations between law enforcement and our community members. And collaborative efforts with the state's attorney to create a drug court. When I worked in Chittenden County, we had a drug court under the leadership of T.J. Donovan, which is currently our Attorney General, and it was awesome. It worked great. We need that here. Tuesday night, I was here for the state's attorney's forum, and they talked about that. And I think it's really important that we get that for our community.
Thank you, Beau. And that's a good transition to where I'm going to go with two really short questions. If you can answer them in a minute or less, actually with yes or no's, that would be handy dandy. It'll be James, Beau, and then Chad on both of these. They're both questions from the audience. Would you support having a drug court and a mental health court in Bennington County? So that's James, Beau, and Chad in that order. A drug court and would you be supportive of that?
I would be supportive of it if it met specific criteria. And this is more than just a yes/no answer.
I understand.
And the reason for that is because, the state's attorney and I, we've sat down and she has her agenda and it works for her. And then you have drug court, and I've talked to so many people, and I have to keep myself open-minded. And, the drug court has worked for people. However, here's the problem that I see with the traditional drug court. The traditional drug court is that once I make the arrest and I have somebody in my presence who wants help that very moment, and we don't have those case management systems set up at this time, the problem that I have is that I issue that person a citation to appear in court for 3 weeks from now, and they leave because it has not met the felony criterion, or Rule 3 exceptions have not been met. What that means is that the moment they walk away from me, they have 3 weeks before they get help. If drug court could be seen like a domestic, where you're seen the very next day and then you're into the system, you're getting the help that you need, then I will support it.
Okay. Beau. Yes, Beau.
So in response to James's response, that's exactly what we talked about on Tuesday, is that it would be a very short process from arrest to court. And that's what drug court does. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken to get there. And we can do that, and the implementation of a drug court, it's huge, it's important. Will I support it? Absolutely. And I will advocate for it.
Thank you.
So
Chad.
I think the concept of both a mental health court and drug court are really good. I don't know enough about the barriers or the reasons why we don't have that here. But anything that we can do to get resources to these people quicker, whether that be treatment, whether it be mental health counseling, whether it be medication, or whether it means they need to go to jail. If that can happen quicker, then I'm all for that, and I would certainly work with the state's attorney's office in any capacity, use my circle of influence, however that may help, but work with her to accomplish that. So,
Thank you. Another question, and Chad, I think it may have been raised because of something that you mentioned. And we're going to keep the same order. Does anybody have any idea about how much the DARE program cost? And would you be willing, as elected sheriffs, to finding other funding sources if the school's funding just isn't there? So that was James again.
I would have to review the curriculum to see if it actually meets the needs of those that we're trying to target. Monies, again, if I go back to the independent or the mandated audit reports, I mean, there's approximately, right now, approximately $100,000 in cash, not payroll in the sheriff's department, that is there. Granted, that is a buffer, but if I needed to get something off the ground, then I would use that, or there's $25,465 that are in loans that have been paid off since 2016 to 2018. I mean, this is a system that you just don't throw out there. As an educator myself, there has to be curriculum, it has to be approved, there has to be units, and then there has to be lesson plans. Or you have to look at something, as we call understanding by design. You have to look at your end result and build your curriculum backwards to see what you actually need. This is a very, very, very dynamic circumstance. It's more than just throwing something out there and saying, let's see if that spaghetti sticks on the wall. So yes, I will do what I could, but the curriculum had to be right and it has to suit the needs of our community.
Thank you. Beau.
Yes, I would, and it would have to be reformed to our current issues that we're having now. I had DARE officers in my school growing up, and I thought it was great. I think they are great. I think it needs to happen. The funding, again, 5% of negotiated contracts go back to the community and the sheriff's department. 25% of my annual salary goes back to the community, directly back to the community. 25% of $82,000 goes directly back to Bennington County. So if that can help with the funding for the DARE program and it fits to what we need, absolutely.
Thanks. Chad.
So I brought this up, so I do support, not necessarily the DARE program as we used to know it, but the new one that I mentioned, which is LEAD, Law Enforcement Against Drugs. It's based out of New Jersey. They do have a K through 12 curriculum. Obviously, that would need to be reviewed by members of the either school board or their curriculum development at the SVSU. But I think that even if it were the LEAD program, I think we need to get back in the schools with police officers delivering content about drug resistance education. I think that's paramount. And the funding, we'll find a way to fund it. The schools used to fund it. You're not talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it is a significant amount, but I'm confident that we can find ways to fund it.
Thank you.
So you guys have been a great audience, and it's just about 8:30, and we would like to give each candidate 5 minutes, so we're hoping you'll stay a little bit past 8:30. And this question comes from the audience, so I'd like you, if possible, to incorporate this question in your 5-minute closing statement. And the question from the audience, an audience member, is what makes you uniquely qualified to run the department, run the sheriff's department? And
Okay.
again, I really appreciate this audience being so patient.
Your questions were wonderful, and your attentiveness was great. When they get done, there's just a couple things I have to say, and then, and we can also give them all applaud, and you can applaud yourselves when the time comes. So the order, as drawn from before, will be Chad, and then Beau, and then James.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you again for hosting this, Mike, Sean Marie, and Bruce. We've heard a lot of different talking, and I'm going to tell you that I'm the one that's here that has the unique and extensive internal knowledge of the department. I've been there for almost 25 years. I was trained by the prior sheriff, and we've built that, him and I together have built that organization from not having any cruisers to now having some of the, some of the other agencies look and think that, wow, that's a pretty nice cruiser, especially other sheriff's departments in the state. So I've had proven leadership as the sheriff over the last 9 years. I've held every rank in the organization, from deputy to senior deputy to captain. I think that I have the servant leadership skills, and when I say servant leadership, I try to turn that triangle of the agency around so that I'm on the bottom, and the people that are really out there doing the day-to-day jobs are above me. I'm there. I exist to get them what they need to do the job. I do empower my employees to be problem solvers. I think that's very important. They come to me with ideas all the time. The Santa's Helpers was not my idea. It was one of my employees. And I gave him the tools necessary to run with that ball. And he did a very successful job. Business experience is important. You got to understand payroll. You got to understand human resources. Again, a sheriff's office could go bankrupt. Imagine what the community resource would be if the sheriff's office was bankrupt. And that almost happened in Wenham County. So it's very important that you have someone in that leadership position that understands financial responsibilities and restraint with money. My education uniquely qualifies me. Again, I have a bachelor's in criminal justice, master's in business, public administration. I attended the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, which is was a 3-month residence-based educational opportunity where you're taught executive leadership. People that graduate from the FBI Academy are, sort of put on a law enforcement pedestal, if you will. They're less than 3% ever make it there. So it's a pretty good thing to have on your resume. I also attended the National Sheriff's Institute, which was held in Longmont, Colorado. It's another executive leadership educational opportunity, but it also catered it to the office of sheriff, an elected position. I've been immersed into the community. In 1994, I joined the Bennington Rural Volunteer Fire Department. I was there for 5 years, climbed the ranks there. Ended up being captain before I left. The Bennington Area Chamber of Commerce, I was a board member for almost 9 years. I was the president for 1 year. That was all a volunteer position. The Bennington Rescue Squad, I was on that board of directors for 3 years. Various other boards, 204 Depot, that program here in town. I was on that board, acted as the secretary-treasurer. And I think I have the personality characteristics that one needs. Being humble. I'm not overly zealous. I don't try to get recognition for everything I do. That's not me. I try to let my people get that recognition. I feel I'm responsive to my employees, to their needs. Always try to find ways to support what they need, whether it be professionally or family oriented. And I think I've delivered on my promises. I've held this position again for 9 years. I take my oath seriously. I've memorized my oath. I know every word. I wake up every day thinking about that oath. And when you're in an elected position, you bear that burden 24/7. It doesn't go away. You can't get a doctor's note to get out of it. It doesn't happen. It's yours forever. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward and hope that I'll have your support on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
So I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming, everybody watching on Facebook and at home, you guys for setting this up. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate everyone that signed my petition, giving me the platform to sit here today. It's great. I planted my roots in the town of Shasberry, and I've wanted to for a long time, and now I'm stepping up to make changes in our community. The Sheriff's Department is currently lacking leadership. It's become stagnant, and I'm not the only one that has said that. I'm not the first, and I won't be the last. Our community can greatly benefit from the platform that the sheriff holds, with a positive, proactive, and innovative leader. You need that part. to capitalize on that platform. Out of us, I've been most recently on the streets, in people's homes, and has seen what is deeply affecting our community. For me, it's not about the money, like I told you guys earlier. The 5% negotiated contracts will not go into my salary, and 25% of my annual salary will go back to the community. And again, I thank you, and hopefully I get your support in November.
Thank you, Beau.
James.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you. You too, I appreciate it, and the audience for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. So the question is, what makes you uniquely qualified to run the Sheriff's Department? I care. It's not about title for me. It's not about money. It's I care. And I see pain. And I see sorrow. And I see distress. And it's my job to fix it. Now, I became a cop a long time ago, 2003, and I can remember when I wanted to be a police officer. I was sitting on Bradford Street with my grandfather, and my grandfather and I would watch my youth walk down the road, and he would say, "Look at that young man." Look, that was back when the pants were down low and the belt wasn't on. "Look at that young man." And I felt that it was my generation and it was my problem to fix. It was my burden to bear. Now, all of you in this room, whether you support me, Beau, or Chad, that's fine. I respect your decision. However, you see your community changing too. There's not many of you in here that I haven't heard this conversation by. Now, I have the education and the desire to fix it. And I've got the skill and the education that I've worked hard to get my master's degree, and we had to make sacrifices in my family so I could fix it. Now, there's been many scare tactics, and I'm going to fire many of you, and I'm going to replace you. That's not true. I need you. Now, I will hire my own investigators. I have two qualified, level 3, part-time, as I am, that are ready to take that spot with $24 an hour, all paid for by the 5%. And if you wish to see me after, I'll show you the contracts that I have here and the totaled math that would support that. Now, the agency is not going to go bankrupt. There are safeguards that are in place. That's why I've already made my connection with Bill Deveneaux. It's not going to happen. And I too woke up. Many of us wake up, including many of us in this room, that still breathe that same oath. And it's not just the administrator that breathes that oath, it's the rookie that's on the street keeping you safe in Bennington. Same in Wynn Hall, same in Manchester, and same by the troops in the Vermont State Police. I feel that I'm uniquely qualified because I care. Now, I appreciate your support on November 6th. Additionally, when you leave, if you wish to know more about me, I have things in the back where Mike is sitting. Please feel free to take some. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we respond to these folks, I just want to say a couple of things. I want to thank you for being here, for being attentive, for providing most of the questions that were asked tonight. Also want to thank CL White Glass and Bennington Mill Properties on Benmont Avenue for underwriting this evening of Bennington tonight. I want to thank Mike Bethel for his offer to Sean Marie and me to moderate. And I want to thank especially, as we did on Tuesday night, I want to thank these 3 candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, I would hope that you would give them a warm applause and thanking them for being out there. Thank you. That's it. We're done.